Alright, thought I'd bring you along when I'm doing the front brake pad change on my 2011 Toyota Sienna. It is a front wheel drive, not the all-wheel drive, and it is a limited edition. As you can see down here, it's limited. And we will get to it. Okay, here's the view of the left-hand front brake as viewed from the front of the wheel well looking towards the rear. This is basically all I've done is take the wheel off, and this is what it looks like. Now we'll go around to the inside or inboard side of the brake calipers and show you looks like there's one bolt there at the top that needs to come off. And there's the one at the bottom that needs to come off. Okay, both of those bolts that I previously showed you are 14mm bolts using a 3/8 drive socket ratchet, and they break loose pretty easily. I believe it's a 25 foot-pound torque, so it's not overly large. And with both bolts removed, I just grab the calipers, being careful not to kink this hose or put any undue stress on it. We'll just pull the calipers off easily. And that's what they look like on the inside. And we'll just bring it around up here, rest it on top of the brake assembly. Got the brake pads right here, and we will remove the springs, I guess. I don't know what they call these things, but just pull those off. Okay, now we're going to remove the brake pads themselves. Once you have those two springs off from there, the wire springs, there's a couple of keepers at the bottom and at the top. They're just kind of spring loaded, so you can just take the brake pad and twist it or pull it out. This is what it looks like once it's removed. And do the same with the inboard brake pad. And now that one's out. Okay, we'll show the comparison between the two, the old and the new brake pads. Obviously the one on top is the new one, which has quite a bit more pad left on it than the lower one. Alright, we now want to take the metal pieces, the clips and shims and things off the old brake pads and put them on the new ones. So we'll take this clip off from here first, and on the brand new brake pad we'll put it on there. And with the brake shim, I use a scraper to get underneath there to pop it up. It's pretty easy. Sometimes they come off easy, sometimes they don't. You notice the brake shims are a little bit dirty outside of the puck area. I generally like to just go ahead and clean those up a bit. You can use brake cleaner, but this is more dirt and combination of the dirt and the lubricant that they put on it, the brake grease, to keep these things from squealing. I generally just take a Brillo pad and lightly clean them off. I went down to my local auto parts store and picked up a can of Permatex Disc Brake Quiet. I'm going to use this on all the mating surfaces, particularly the shims that ride up against the brake pads. Hopefully this will keep these brakes from squealing. Put my brake shims on a plastic bag just so I can spray this brake quiet on it. Supposed to let it dry for I think 10 or 15 minutes, the instructions say, then I'll turn it over and do the other side. Okay, before installing the new brake pads, one of the things you're going to need to do is to retract the brake pistons. Before you do that, you need to make sure that you have plenty of room, that your main reservoir, your master cylinder, is not completely full of brake fluid. Because when you push these pistons in, it's forcing brake fluid back up to the reservoir, and if you are already full before you start this process, you could overflow the reservoir, and that causes a mess when you get this brake fluid dripping down everything, and it will remove paint and eat up stuff, so you do not want to overflow your reservoir. Here's a picture of my reservoir, and as you can tell, it is only about halfway between the max and the min levels for the brake fluid. So hopefully I'll have enough room in there so I don't have to suck out any of the brake fluid. I will be careful and make sure that I check this often. Okay, I generally use a big C-clamp to compress these pistons or push the pistons back in the housing. Just open it up fairly well like this, and you put one end inside the piston. Takes it a while to tighten it down. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but the piston is recessing into the brake caliper. And that may be good enough there, maybe a little bit more. Now I'll take the C-clamp back out. And always make sure that when you're doing this that your clamp is not pressing on the brake line hose on the back of the caliper or anything else that would be sensitive to being pinched. Okay, so that side is done also now. Even though I didn't show it on the video, I used some Scotch-Brite to clean up the surface of the pistons that contacts the shims. The piston surface was a little bit rusty and had some dirt on it. Wasn't too bad, cleaned up pretty good, so hopefully that will help prevent squealing or any brake noise. Here's a second look after I've compressed the two pistons on the left front caliper. It really didn't change the level of the brake fluid in the reservoir all that much, so I should be good to compress the pistons on the other left front, or I'm sorry, the other right front, and we'll probably be up still below the max level. Okay, I've reassembled the shims that I've put that Permatex anti-squeal stuff on, and now it's time to put the brake pads back where they belong. It's just a matter of pushing them up against the disc, and we'll do the one on the back also. As you can see, both of the brake pads, the inboard and outboard, are seated up against the brake rotor or the disc. So so there's no gaps in there right now. So now it's time to put the springs that we saved from when we were taking it apart. I said that you needed to save those. My brake pads came with springs, so I'll be putting new springs on. Okay, time to put the springs on to the brake pads. It's actually pretty easy to do these. In fact, easier to put them back on than it is to take off. You just find the little holes that the ends of the springs go into, insert it in there on one side, and then compress the spring and line it up with the other hole, and there you have it. Okay, now it's time to put the caliper back in place. Time to see if we've actually compressed the brake pistons, the caliper pistons, far enough to accommodate the new brake pads. And as I see here, I haven't got it compressed enough, so I'll have to redo that step. Okay, I've pushed the brake pistons in a little bit further, so now we'll see if we can fight this thing back into place. And there we go. Actually, let me show you here. The pistons have to be pretty much flush inside the calipers to fit the new brake pads in there. You also have to press the area where the bolt screws into on the top and the bottom that we took out. You got to compress those back in so the calipers can fit over top of them. Once you get pretty much into place, you grab the two bolts. And sometimes getting these to line up can sometimes be a little bit difficult, other times not so much. Okay, we're going to snug up the two bolts, the one on the top and the bottom, before we put the torque wrench on it. It's fairly snug there, snug there. I previously set the torque setting on my torque wrench to 25 foot-pounds. Let's see if we can fit it in here. There's 25 foot-pounds on the top, 25 foot-pounds on the bottom. Okay, now that the two retention bolts are torqued down, we're pretty much done with this side. So you can see the shim that was now blue with the Permatex anti-squeal goop on it on the outside, and we're good to go. Okay, I'm finished with the front brake pads on both sides, and to kind of show you where we ended up with, I am right at the maximum fluid level, or maybe just a hair below it, but that's what you get when you compress the pistons inside of the calipers. Just a couple of closing thoughts on this project. I forgot to mention that my rotors were in good shape and had no grooves that could cause premature wear on the new brake pads. After completing brake pad replacement, remember to pump your brakes a few times until normal brake pedal feel is attained. Even though this was a relatively simple project, remember to double check your work before finishing.